Happy day. I'm excited to be with you on this chilly, chilly January day. I wanted to speak today about a little bit about today's daily word. The word is rise. Our affirmation is I rise in consciousness to help create a world that works for all. So many of us are struggling right now. We have a worldwide pandemic. So many of our regular social interaction opportunities have been diminished or eliminated. Um, it's it's been a struggle for many of us. Most of us have struggled to some degree or another. And let's face it, when we struggle, our stuff comes up, right? Our stuff, our old unresolved hurts and woundedness, any insecurities that we might have, all of that comes alive when we are in trying times. And I always say, if you've heard me talk before, you've probably heard this phrase, yay opportunity, right? I always think that if I'm going to go through a time in my life when I'm struggling, if I'm going to have to be triggered, if I'm going to have to go through a difficult time, I am going to find the opportunity in that situation and milk it for all I can. I'm going to get as much positive benefit as I possibly can because I'm going to have to move through the difficulty, whether I get something out of it or not. So we may as well use it to our advantage. So what is the yay opportunity when we are struggling, when we are being triggered, when our insecurities are being touched on? Today's affirmation of I rise in consciousness to help create a world that works for all is kind of the epitome of yay opportunity. So first of all, I want to share with you my thoughts on why these yay opportunity and I rise in consciousness to create a world that works for all are so closely related. I truly believe that when our stuff comes up, when we're being triggered, it isn't because we're broken. It isn't because we're wounded. Because let's face it, there are people who are wounded and their stuff is alive and well in them, but not causing them problems. They're living their life happy to have the dysfunctions that they have. And then for some of us, we know that we're being triggered. We know that our stuff is coming up and we just don't know what to do about it. But we're not really happy with it being there. We are being called to heal. Our stuff is coming up not because we're broken, but because we're whole. The highest part of our consciousness, that Christ nature that is at the core of who and what we are, our inner sacredness, knows that we are whole and knows that we are limited by our woundedness. So the fact that our woundedness comes up isn't because we're broken or because our wounds want to be celebrated. It is because the highest part of us wants us to resolve that woundedness so we can live more from our wholeness. So let's think about that first, just in general, right? And how that change in perspective might affect our interactions. If I have an interaction with someone and I'm triggered and I am offering in that moment resistance because I don't want to be triggered, I don't want to feel whatever it is I'm feeling, and I'm thinking about how, I'm the one who's hurt and all of those things, I am all in resistance to that situation. However, when I look at this situation and I can recognize that my stuff is coming up because I am called to live from my wholeness, I can see this as the opportunity that it is. I can see this as a moment of choice where I can choose to support my woundedness and stay in resistance, or support my wholeness and step through those triggers and that situation with courage, right? And let's face it, it is scary as heck to, in the moment when we're so vulnerable, to embrace that vulnerability and move through it courageously, right? So rather than defensively. So let's say that we can buy into the idea that there is opportunity when we're being triggered. There's opportunity when we are in conflict. Let's say that we can adopt that idea. Okay, then what? Our first step is to really set our intention. To set our intention for awareness as early as possible when we're triggered. And I say as early as possible because here's how it goes. You find yourself in a conflict, you find yourself triggered. You have the experience, you respond however you respond. And then as you're reflecting on it, you have awareness and you realize, wow, I was in the middle of being triggered there and I got defensive, or whatever response you have. But the awareness comes after the fact. With intention and practice, the point of trigger and the point of awareness get closer and closer and closer. With intention and practice, that awareness keeps moving closer to the point of trigger, to the point where eventually you realize you have choice in the moment. That moment of choice is a powerful moment. I remember in my own life, for the first time, given in a certain situation, I had choice in the moment. And I remember how liberating it felt. I still didn't make the highest choice in that moment, but I made a better choice than I normally would have. As we move through our life experiences and we become aware of where we are being triggered and when, and we have awareness in the moment, we can really start to become present in the moment, in the situation. Because what happens when we're triggered, we want to distance ourselves from these uncomfortable feelings, and we're not present. We're just reacting. I have a friend who, she says she goes into Stepford wife mode. And no matter what's happening around her, she's, yes, everything's fine, it's okay. And then after the fact, she'll have her little breakdown or sadness or anger or whatever it is. But in the moment, she's so disconnected and so not present that there's no choice there, right? So we become aware in the moment, and then we can feel what is happening in our body. I always ask myself that because when I am disconnected from being present, I am unaware of what's happening in my body. The very act of questioning what is happening in my body will bring me present if I'm not already. I acknowledge how challenging this is in the moment of being triggered, in the moment of a conflict. It's challenging because one, you have to bring yourself into presence, and we don't want to do that. And it's also challenging because our body is likely feeling things that we don't want to feel. We might have tightness in our chest, our heart rate is racing, our blood pressure might be going up. For me, an old one for me used to always be my throat would tighten up. I'd feel like I had a knot in my throat. But it's important to become present and to feel what is happening in the body. Sometimes just becoming aware and present in the moment is enough to allow us to call upon our spiritual teachings, what we know about healthy communication, how we can be better in whatever our interaction is. Sometimes it's enough just being aware and present. Sometimes we're aware and we're present and we still make bad choices or choices that aren't so great in the moment. And this is where I like to have a hip pocket response. And what I mean by that is I know where I'm being triggered. I know the kinds of conversations that trigger me. I know the people that trigger me. I know the situations that trigger me. So I can prepare for those interactions with my spiritual teachings, with what I know about healthy communication, all of those things. And I can have a response in my pocket, right? So what I've mentioned to you all before, how when I am sick or having a health problem, what I used to do is I would isolate because nobody loved me and I didn't deserve care when I was sick. That was my limited thinking. And then as I moved away from that kind of consciousness, I found myself still with relationships that I had built with my previous consciousness, right? Relationships with people who didn't step up and care for me when I was ill. Well, over time, it takes courage, right? To say in the moment, I'm sick, I need help. And here's where the big challenge is, right? Let's say you have awareness, you have intention, you have awareness, you allow yourself in that moment of being triggered to be present, you know what's happening with your body, and you know what the healthy response is. For me, I'm sick, so I'm in my vulnerable state. What I really need from those around me is to be cared for, right? In my sickness. And I'm not getting that, so I'm triggered, right? But I have intention and I have awareness. Okay, what does a healthy relationship look like in this situation? Well, I think a healthy situation looks like if I'm not getting what I need, I ask for what I need. Ideally, what happens is then we would get our needs met. But here's where the courage comes in, because we actually are very vulnerable in those moments. First of all, we need courage to ask for what we need or to set a boundary or whatever your thing is. So I had courage I was recently sick. I had the courage. First I had the intention, then I had the awareness, and then I, checked with my body. I became present. What does a healthy relationship do? What does a healthy emotionally healthy person do? They ask for what they need. So I mustered up my courage and I asked for what I needed, and I got turned down. This is where the courage comes in. Because in that moment of vulnerability, I did not get what I wanted, right? And in that moment, I knew that this current, now moment was not a reflection of all my previous moments of not being cared for, right? So this is not a reflection on me and my value. This is a reflection of this moment, right? So what did I need in that moment? I needed to be cared for. And what that looked like for me at that time was I was hungry and I was too tired and fatigued to cook a decent meal, right? So rather than, so knowing in the moment that I can feed my health and wholeness and my highest sacred self, or I can feed my woundedness. So that's the choice I have in that moment. And so I was present, and I felt, it was interesting because in the past, I felt rejected when a similar situation happened. In this moment, I just felt sadness. Nothing else. It wasn't complex at all. It was just simple. I was just sad that I didn't get my needs met from the other person. And so I decided, okay, what is my response to this situation? I got on my phone and I DoorDashed myself some healthy food that someone else cooked. So I got my needs met. I was able to take care of myself. I was able to provide that for myself. And rather than living from my dysfunction of I'm not good enough, nobody cares, nobody loves me, that was my old story that I tied to not getting cared for in the way that I wanted or needed. I tied it to I'm not good enough, nobody loves me, that whole thing. In this moment, I did not tie that story. In this moment, I tied the story of I deserve to be cared for. And that looks like good, healthy food that nourishes my body when it needs it the most. I provided that myself. And it was so interesting because I really believe that because I stepped into supporting my health and wholeness rather than supporting my dysfunction in my response to that vulnerable, cringy moment, not only did I have a good experience in the current moment, but I actually healed some of those past moments, right? Because I am moving further and further and further away from those inaccurate stories that I had tied to that particular need of mine that wasn't getting met. So this is what I'm calling upon you to do today and in the days to come. Set your intention to become aware of what your triggers are, when your triggers are, who triggers you, those kinds of things. Celebrate your awareness. Even if the awareness happens after the fact, keep practicing, keep the intention, keep striving for awareness. When awareness occurs in the moment of trigger or in the moment of conflict, really become present with it. Feel the body. If you're in interaction with another person, just say, I have to hit the pause button for a second. I've actually done that and it works. And sometimes it even shifts the whole energy of the conflict. But ask for a moment. I just need a moment, and get present. Feel what's happening in the body. Awareness will bring, or presence will bring answers in the moment. And this is a skill that we all have the potential to develop, right? And then in the moment, we are able to choose. So my call to you is to do those steps. Set your intention, be aware, and be present, and listen to your intuition while you're presencing in the moment. And to feed your own health and wholeness, so you can more and more live from that place of health and wholeness, rather than living from our woundedness and our dysfunction. A lot of people think that this is more of a mental health practice. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it is our divine birthright to create the life that we want to live. And the way to do that is to live from our highest self, to live from our Christ nature, to bring the most sacred part of ourselves out into the world. That is our divine birthright. And our whole lives are spent dampening down our greatness, covering up our sacredness with dysfunction. It is spiritual practice to heal your wounds, to heal your woundedness. It is spiritual practice to love yourself into being able to live from your wholeness. So here's what we're going to do for our meditation together. Let's think of our own life situation. Think of a person that you have conflict with, a person who triggers you, or even a situation where you feel like there's conflict or trigger. Let's just think about that and set our intention intellectually and energetically. Let's set our intention to bring awareness into that moment, those future moments of conflict and struggle. Let's just set that intention. And now let's, with our intellectual mind, before we go into meditation, meditative state, let's set aside the story that we have attached to this person or situation. There's no good guy or bad guy. There's no right or wrong. It just is. It's a person, it's a situation. For these next few minutes, we're just going to set aside the story that we have around the person or situation. And now let's get heart-centered. I invite you to take 3 deep breaths. One more. And we focus on the heart space. Acknowledge and embrace that indwelling Christ presence. Acknowledge and embrace that at the core of who and what you are sacred. Imagine, sense, and feel that this sacredness fills your being. Feel your heart both fed by spirit and feeding from spirit, taking in and emanating out pure sacredness. Feel the safety of this moment. Acknowledge the connection and support connected to all that is, everything in the universe supporting you. Imagine your person or situation in front of you. And from this safe place where you are in this moment, open your heart and open your mind. There's no vulnerability in this moment, just safety, support, and your Christ nature. With this person or situation in front of you and an open heart and an open mind, we just take that openness into the silence. We might get insight as to what is ours to do. We might simply feel the connectedness that is there. Whatever we get, we have an open heart and an open mind. And we bring our person, our situation into our heart space for a few moments in silence. As we move forward with an open heart and an open mind, we have an intention to live from our wholeness, to make choices that support that intention. We move away from supporting our wounds and living from our woundedness, and we move toward living from a point of awareness, a point of connectedness, living from our highest self. And so it is. Amen. Namaste.